thousands. If you search just for FNAF and select games, you're presented with 36 games per page and 277 pages available. That is 9,961 games that are tagged using FNAF. And if you're sitting there thinking, hold on, the math there doesn't add up, you're right, good noticing. That's because I had to remove 11 of Scott's own games that were posted on that list. Though, I'm pretty sure that there are some out there who like to pretend that FNAF World was a fan game. Each and every one of those 10,000 fan games represents a budding game designer, sometimes several. And while yeah, many of those creators are likely never going to pursue game design full-time, there are some who will, either independently or as part of a bigger studio, going on to have their shot at creating their own mega franchise, their shot to transform the industry. And already you can see that some of these devs are finding success, to the point where many of them have created multiple different games at this point, turning their fan projects into full-on franchises of their own. And all of this is without even mentioning the Fanverse initiative, where Scott invested money and resources into some of the most promising projects to help those fledgling businesses grow. Now, the success of that one is up for debate for various reasons, but the point ultimately stands. Five Nights at Freddy's has been directly and indirectly involved in the rise of a new generation of game developers. Developers that, just now, 10 years later, we're only starting to see get to a point where they're really influencing the wider gaming landscape. Except gaming, it's already seen a massive shift coming off the heels of FNAF. Prior to FNAF's release, if you took a look at any top 10 list about horror games, it would have been filled with games like Outlast, PT, Amnesia, games that leaned hard into psychological horror and sometimes graphic gore. FNAF, though, was different. While other horror games used the classic horror trope of not knowing what the monster looked like, relying on the audience's mind to fill in the blanks of what might be lurking in the shadows, FNAF put the monsters front and center, allowing them to be the star of the show like we see in movies like Friday the 13th and Halloween. This allowed FNAF games to be much more thumbnail friendly and easier to sell online compared to the spooky dark hallways or overcomplicated monster designs that dominated the horror space in the past. Mix in the more family-friendly scares of Freddy and the gang, and you've got yourself a brand new subgenre of content, mascot horror, as dubbed by YouTuber John Wolf. This genre took old nostalgic locations and filled them with brightly colored killers brought to life through some weird experiment or drama. Bendy and the Ink Machine, Poppy Playtime, Rainbow Friends, My Friendly Neighborhood, Hello Neighbor, Baldi's Basics, Choo Choo Charles, Man of the Adventure, and of course, Carton of Ban Ban. And that's not even dipping into the hundreds of lesser-known titles like Joyville. It was FNAF who paved the way for all of these games. Poppy sold 2 million copies in 2 years. Bendy has made over $30 million just off of its 2 major installments. Hello Neighbor is a thing that continues to exist. And while people complain about oversaturation in the market at this point, there is no denying that the formula has worked extremely well for the better part of the last 10 years. But maybe you're sick of games. You want to read a book? Well, I hope you're excited to read the 7 Hello Neighbor books, 5 Bendy books, or the Poppy Playtime Employee Handbook that's coming out later this year. Mascot horror franchises now also line the shelves of your local Barnes & Noble. Why? Because FNAF did it first. Oh sure, Scholastic had done some video game book publishing in the past, mostly guidebooks and activity books, but after the success of the FNAF trilogy, they began to publish other video game books like Assassin's Creed Last Descendants, World of Warcraft Traveler. This led them to launch an entirely separate wing to their business, AFK, the video game specific book department. It's these guys who are publishing all the books that Tom is now gonna have to read. Now, it's impossible to know for certain that FNAF was the reason for all this, but given it was often shown at the top of articles for this new publishing arm at launch, and has sold 9 million books to date, with an average book price being about $10, that is $90 million infused into the historically struggling print publishing business. It's no wonder the first 6 rows of their website are dedicated to FNAF. But without AFK, it's easy to imagine a world where these other mascot horror games didn't get that chance, and all those writers who've now been able to make a living off of these franchises wouldn't be recognized like they are. I mean, take for instance Andrea Wagner, who wrote the vast majority of Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. She's now getting DM'd by fans asking for lore clarifications, something I'm sure she never anticipated while working on her past writing projects, like her dog how-to book, Dog Parenting, or Alternate Beauty, the story of a big girl with big dreams. Her words, not mine. The same thing is now happening with another struggling industry, movies. After spending 8 years in production hell, losing directors, struggling with studios, and trying to nail down a script, Blumhouse eventually took the chance on FNAF, making the movie on a $20 million budget and earning back nearly $300 million. If you don't think Hollywood has taken strong notice of that when they are struggling to get butts in seats, you are wrong. You think it's a coincidence that 2 months after FNAF's release, Bendy announced his big screen debut? And while a Poppy Playtime movie was already in the works with Studio 71, I can almost guarantee conversations with studios around it have shifted in the aftermath of FNAF. And who knows what other mascot horror games might end up with movies down the line. And not only is it getting indie game movies greenlit, it's also reshaping film studio studio priorities. As they continue to fumble around in the dark, struggling to find ways to compete with online content, I've literally had conversations with people in the film space about how they're trying to tap into that FNAF audience, that online community. The success of this one film will be shaping the types of movies that get made and how they look moving forward. I guarantee it. But while movie releases mean big bucks for big studios, the economic ramifications go way beyond just extra cash in the pocket of Jason Blum. The FNAF movie was shot in New Orleans, which, since Hurricane Katrina, has been an economically depressed part of the country. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but from speaking to local actors and business owners while I was down there filming last year, I learned that New Orleans actually has a long history in film production. When the state government of Louisiana first introduced tax breaks for film productions back in 2002, over 1,000 projects happened down there in the span of 7 years. Those productions created jobs, hired locals, and brought millions of dollars back into the city. However, pre-COVID, those incentives were rolled back, and productions have now started to move to other places like Georgia. That's why so many of the local actors and business owners I spoke with while down there were eager to see the FNAF movie in town. By shooting in New Orleans, a huge chunk of that $20 million budget was going to accommodations, drivers, caterers, local talent, location rentals, equipment, and other general resources that help local businesses thrive, and maybe start a domino effect to get other movies back in the region. Regardless of all of that, the point is that this one decision to try one final game, it's grown beyond itself. It's no longer about just making its own franchise full of games. It's spread to all corners of the media industry and to so many other IPs and creators, spawning a wave of new franchises and giving life to so many careers that otherwise might not have had a chance. But speaking of careers, there's one final area that's also needing to be addressed, an area that has been so affected by FNAF it's crazy to not talk about, and that of course is here on YouTube. FNAF has done a lot of numbers for a lot of industries, but its effect on the YouTube landscape is still visible to this day, and in a much more obvious way. When FNAF first launched, it was just one of many games that YouTubers started playing because spooky games got big views. This game gave rise to some of the biggest names on the platform, names that are still going strong today. Let's players like Corey X Kenshin and Markiplier, who'd been on YouTube for a couple of years, but saw their careers accelerate in parallel alongside the FNAF releases. You also had a massive surge in nerdcore musical artists like The Living Tombstone, whose FNAF song was at 1 million views in a couple of weeks, whereas most other songs they would release would have a few 100,000 views months after release. And Machinima creators started using FNAF models and characters to tell their own unique stories long before the FNAF movie ever hit theaters, racking up literally billions of views. But what truly set FNAF apart were obviously the hidden details cluing fans into the bigger story. This, more than anything else, ignited the internet's passion like never before, giving rise to the theorist community. People like Dawko, Rezbowski, 8-Bit Ryan, Rytoast, ID's Fantasy, Hyperdroid, John FNAF, and of course, us, going through this game piece by piece in order to find the hidden story within it. Now, contrary to popular belief, FNAF wasn't the first thing that actually had us creating lore theories. That was always just part of the channel's DNA. But before FNAF, we were coming up with lore theories for franchises where the story was basically well known. Whether or not Majora's Mask is an allegory for grieving, you get the story of a moon crashing down. Regardless of whether Peach is Rosalina's mom, you get the basic premise of Mario Galaxy. Humans certainly might be Pokemon. That's not really affecting anyone's journey to become a league champ. But FNAF was different. It showed that games could be built off of withholding the lore and forcing the fanbase to solve it. By leaving the door open and never confirming anything, Scott allowed YouTubers, Redditors, and just general fans to continually assess and reassess the lore, find new directions, new hot takes, and that means that we're still theorizing about it to this very day. Can it be frustrating? Absolutely. Heck, maybe now that I'm retiring from the channel, I can track Scott down and get some answers out of him. But it's also entertaining, and the success of this theory-based model on YouTube has carried over into the mainstream, where now almost every game and movie release is designed with theory crafting in mind. While it's impossible to calculate the full scope of FNAF on YouTube, I was able to find that there are 106 videos with more than 10 million views each. Together, they total roughly 5.4 billion views on just their very own. And if we assume that they're getting the standard gaming CPM on YouTube, which is about $4.55, that then's a total earning across all of those videos of $24,570,000 in ad revenue. Markiplier's literally gone on record to say that the house that he lives in is the house that FNAF paid for, and he's joked on his Distractable podcast about how lucrative FNAF's been for it.
Let's go into a fan favorite here. Five Nights at Freddy's.
Boo. So there's two ways I could look at this, right? I could look at it from the game purely by itself, or I could look at it at the dividends it is paid out for me specifically.
And that's put him in a position to pursue bigger and loftier projects like the With Markiplier series, and now his movie Iron Lung. One half of The Living Tombstone, Sam Haft, is now writing songs for internet sensations like Has Been Hotel. YouTubers like FNAF and Rytoast, they've been able to go full-time with YouTube, all thanks to FNAF. And heck, look at us. Because of FNAF, we've thrived. We've been able to grow our team, give jobs to dozens of people, and perhaps best of all, we've carved out our own platform that allows us to turn the spotlight onto a next generation of creatives, to make us tastemakers in the space that are able to pay it forward, to make you aware of projects that you should be playing and watching, from Cooking Companions to The Man in the Suit to Shipwrecked 64, Welcome Home, Mandela Catalog, Walton Files. The list goes on and on and on. In short, FNAF created an ecosystem where new IPs can thrive, a virtuous cycle that benefited itself, to be sure, but also had a halo effect on dozens of other franchises looking to get attention. And all of this is without even mentioning other trickle-down effects. Our large platform allowed us to run charity events like St. Jude, paying that blessing forward to help doctors and hospitals working on treatments for childhood cancer, where of course, Scott himself was a sizable and direct contributor year after year. There are also dozens of other charity events coming from creators like Dawko, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, Rye Toast, John FNAF. Not only have these events been able to raise tens of millions of dollars for various organizations looking to do good work in the world, hopefully those events in turn inspired others, you out in the audience or other creators, to adopt a spirit of generosity and giving in their own lives. And again, it all comes down to this one decision. One guy who in the face of adversity and criticism chose not to give up. That is the millions of people and billions of dollars affected by that one Spoopy Bear game. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for all of
Thank
it.
you,
And while
Scott.
all
Scott,
of this is cool
right
and
here, bro.
impressive and
Right here.
inspirational, it's also overwhelming, right? You look at the
Overwhelming,
impact that
why?
one decision like this can have and you feel like you can never live up. I know that's how I feel sometimes. But remember, it's all about small
too.
decisions making a domino effect. Just being kind to someone else, saying something nice, holding a door, listening to someone's problems, making them laugh. All of those are seemingly small things that can make a massive difference in the way someone's day's going. And that to me has always been the power of these channels. They're a place to learn a little something, a place to brighten your day in some small way, which then you can pay forward to other people in your life. And that positivity, it spreads. It spreads and creates real
I'm
massive
actually gonna
change.
cry.
That to me,
I'm actually
honestly,
gonna
is the hardest thing about leaving these channels. Losing that chance to be a force of just a little bit of good in your life. But you know what? I'm not done yet. I'll see you one last time next week, March 9th
Bye,
at 2
Game
p.m.
Theory. We're
Eastern,
gonna miss
11
you.
a.m. Pacific, as I celebrate with you one
Is it
final
gonna be, like,
time
live
as a theorist
or-
community. Until then,
or is
as
it gonna be,
always,
like,
remember,
we
it's
get
all
there?
just a theory. A game,
game
theory.
theory.
Thanks for watching.
We're gonna miss you, dude.